Every once in a while, a game comes out that's completely different from anything I've ever played or even thought of playing. Pikmin is an example of this, with such unique gameplay, ideas, and bosses that I would have never thought of. Super Monkey Ball is also extremely unique and so genius in its simplicity that I would say it's almost a perfect game. Then there is something with an idea so out of the blue and just plain strange that I have to play it. Billy Hatcher, the Giant Egg for the Nintendo GameCube, came out on September 23rd of 2003 and would be classified as one of the strangest and yet most unique games I've ever played. I hadn't ever seen a game with such a strange idea, lore, and gameplay, and to this day I'm still not able to find games like it. I would like to say this game is so weird that it works perfectly, but that statement is very wrong. However, this game really does provide any player with a completely new experience and an entertaining time. Today, I would like to talk about Billy Hatcher. You know, there are some games that just age well. When they came out, they were great, and as the years went by, they ended up being even greater. You can come back to these games anytime and find it even more fun than the first time you played it. Oh, wait a minute. Wrong game. Oh no. So, Billy Hatcher. It's definitely a game. Like I said before, this game has a lot of interesting ideas, all jumbled into one Frankenstein monster kind of game. The story has Billy Hatcher, controlled by the player, saving the 6 elder chickens from each of the different lands to bring back Day from the ravens. That's not exactly a sequence of words I was expecting to say today. After Billy Hatcher frees them all from their eggs, Day returns and he can then come back and defeat a boss brought in from the leader of the ravens. Billy travels through all sorts of different lands, each one unique in its own way, and then eventually fights the one who has been shown as the leader of the Ravens. However, this was only a farce, and the real leader now must be defeated, after the player collects more than double the amount of emblems they currently have. Great. Billy Hatcher finally gets to go to the Dark Raven and defeat him, only to have the giant egg break open and make the real final boss. Billy then gets a new suit made of pure courage, or something, and is able to defeat the Dark Raven and bring back morning to the whole world. I gotta say, I feel like permanent daytime is something used somewhere else, and it really didn't work out too well. The good. I'll start off by saying the thing I have constantly said this entire video. This game is very unique. The enemy design is really neat, and as you continue through the game, you actually see even more new enemies, not including bosses. This is something I really like in a game, because it prevents it from getting stale. As you can see, all of these enemies are different and are just quite entertaining to see. These bouncing enemies still make me laugh every time I hear their stupid... Speaking of enemies, let's talk about bosses. The first thing I would say about them is that the boss music is fantastic. It's not too crazy, it's not too dull, and it has a very, once again, unique feel to it. The bosses themselves are also quite great. Each one of them is pretty special. A gecko boss from the grass area? Great idea. What about a walrus boss for the ice area? Perfect. And a juggling monkey in a funhouse with mirrors? Of course, how could I have never thought of that? I unfortunately don't have any footage of the final boss because of the stupid having to get 25 emblems of courage thing, but I will say that it was a fantastic boss fight and had my heart rushing many times. It was also quite difficult, but not unfair in its difficulty. The levels in this game are pretty neat too. Each one is different and has a great feel to it, or at least most of them do. This snowy area is a little blinding. The music in these areas is great too, and they seem to fit each zone perfectly. You can see the great variation between these areas, and the chickens that show up to bring back Day fit the zones so well. Of course, so far I've barely talked about the gameplay, and mainly talked about how the game looks and sounds. It's time to talk about how the game actually works once you grab the controller. The bad. Oh boy. I really wish I could say this game has those timeless qualities like Mario 64 or Pikmin or Super Monkey Ball have, but I can't. This game has not aged well. Where to start? First off, this game controls like absolute garbage. The game starts off pretty easy to control and is a relaxing experience. Then, sometime around the 3rd or 4th zone, things really fall apart. In the background here, I'll show an example of this. This jump here is near impossible to make, and then another quick jump needs to be made. Let's see my failures here. Or this, in this same zone, they make the slope too steep to run up, so you have to run and then jump at the very end of your dash. Why? To be fair, what would you expect out of a game that involves rolling? Oh, right. That's a game based on rolling that controls great. Now, I could nitpick on some things, like the boss moles and how unfair it is, or I could talk about how certain eggs are completely useless in this game, but they still show up all the time. However, I'm going to choose a specific level to talk about here. Like I said, each of the zones in this game are quite special, but the first level in the Circus Park zone is where the game really starts to fall apart. This level gave me my fair share of deaths when I was younger, and as you can see, even with growing up and having played the game more times, it still gives me trouble. The camera doesn't follow correctly, the egg sometimes fails to get on the rails, Billy has trouble getting through the hole in the wall, and it's just plain annoying. The later level that involves going through a pyramid while the sand is getting raised is even more annoying. I'll just show some gameplay and you guys can see for yourself why it's so incredibly annoying. I would also like to mention that the game forces you to get 25 emblems of courage to reach the final boss. Like I mentioned, I didn't reach the final boss while recording for this reason. Just like Mario 64, you have to return to old levels to progress. However, in Mario 64, this was a fun thing to do. In Billy Hatcher, there are 6 zones that you can return to, and a lot of levels that you have to go through are just plain tedious. It does help that the music and atmosphere is great, but it still is difficult to make it through, especially with the bad controls. I'd like to cap this off with one statement. This game is one of a kind. Now I'll give some follow-up statements. Like I said before, I have never played something like this and probably never will. The idea is magnificent, the bosses are really amazing, the music is stellar, but the gameplay itself is quite mediocre. However, it's not the worst controlling game I've played. This game was made in 2003 and there were no previous games to copy-paste the controls and gameplay from. Nowadays, almost every game seems to have the exact same control scheme, physics engine, and gameplay in general, so I can definitely cut it some slack. It's not a bad game. All that being said, I cannot say that I come back to this game often. Regardless of whether or not it deserves negativity because of bad controls, it doesn't change the fact that it's still very hard to play. However, I wouldn't discount it as a game to ignore. The multiplayer is something I decided not to cover, but it is pretty entertaining. There's not a whole lot to do in it other than just hatch eggs and try to kill the other players, but I've had some fun with it. Some people put this as their favorite game of all time, and although I can't see it as being the best game out there, I can understand loving it. There's something special about it that really grows on you. Give it a try if you get the chance. See if you like it. It's an acquired taste, like fine wine, if that wine was stored in a styrofoam cup. Well, those are my thoughts on Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. I'd like to know what you guys think about the game. Leave a comment about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.